Okay, guys, welcome back. The last 2 weeks. So far, 2 midterms, main topics. We start with variables, conditions, and loops. Basically, your first midterm, the first challenging topics, not the only ones, but the most interesting. Then, 2 weeks ago, we moved to object-oriented programming. And we have been working with this idea of objects. In particular, we moved forward from static everything to now having both options, static or non-static things. We have been working with publics and private, 2 options. And finally, we go deep in the complexity of methods, starting with methods that were void and without parameters. Now we're working with methods that return things and receive parameters. And that include getter, setter, constructor, toString, equal, and other options. So what is next? The next 2 weeks, I think the most important topic that we're going to cover, starting today, arrays. Another interesting topic that we mentioned before, one, arrays is related with variables, with storing data. The other, recursion, is connected with methods and using methods. So we're going to be talking about those 2 things in these last 2 weeks from the class. Now, arrays, starting with arrays. At this point, we are doing programs. We are using variables, different types. And I am sure that you face situations in which you need a lot of data, a lot of variables. For instance, if you remember my class student, usually we play with the student and we use 2 or 3 variables. Now that we're playing with things, private, the name, we use the ID, and maybe we use only 1 variable. Final grade. Now, what happened in my class student if, for instance, I would like to store not only the final grade, but the grades for your assignments? You have 5 assignments. So probably something like that. So at the end, the names are irrelevant. The only thing is I want to store the grades, 5 grades for your 5 assignments. Now, what if I want to store the grades for your labs? How many labs? A lot, right? Obviously, you can start with lab 1 and use copy paste lab 2, lab 3, lab 4, and continue. It could be a lot of effort used to copy paste name for the variables. It could be a very long program if you think about 25 labs and therefore 25 variables. When you have that requirement, when you need to store a lot of data, sometimes it's not a good idea to create one variable per data that you want to store, like one variable per lab. Usually, what happens is even if you create those 25 variables or those 5 variables, the people, the developers, usually what we do is we use one name and then we use numbers. Just because we do not want to be worried about thinking different names, right? Similar with the labs. Because we usually do this, well, the language, Java, give you the opportunity to create a variable that instead of being like as usual, one variable is one space in the memory that have a data type and that have a name. Remember, that was our definition of variable. Each of these is one box. That box have one name and have one data type. Well, something that Java, any other programming language also allow you to do is the following. You can ask for a variable that have a particular data type, but instead of being one space for only one thing, you can ask not for one, but for several boxes. So variable is one box, one name, one data type. But the language allows you to create a particular special kind of variable that is going to be one name, is going to be one type, but you are going to have access to more than one space. And these particular kind of variables are called arrays. Arrays. Yeah. The idea is the following. When you need a variable, well, the only thing that you do is something like this. It's only one box. And then you can use your variable like something like this. And that means you put that inside of the box that you created, right? So variables, that is what you have in your memory. And this is what you do to create a variable and to use the variable. Now, if we want more than one space, if we want several things together, if we want an array, well, things are going to change a little bit. Advantage. When you create an array, instead of having this A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, lab 1, lab 2, lab 3, and so on, what you are going to do, number one, is you are going to create the variable. You can use any name that you want, but in order to tell the computer that what you want is not only one, but several spaces, you are going to use a particular group of symbols. these symbols. Do you remember them? You have been using them in main. The parameter in main, remember? String, square brackets. This is string, square brackets. Square brackets mean array. Okay, so here is one variable, one name. Here, you're asking for a variable. And step number one, you're going to tell the computer that that one is not going to be one space, but several. Several mean any number, one or more. Next, something that you need to do is obviously to tell the computer how many spaces do you want. And this is the new thing. We need to do an equal. This equal is not this one. This equal is to define how many boxes I want. Check. And I put this in black. Important things. One, we use the keyword new. Do you remember? New is to create objects. Well, new thing. New is to create objects. Yes. And new is also to create arrays. Every single time that you want an array, this variable with multiple boxes, you are going to be using the keyword new. Next, do you remember that after new, you put again the data type for the object, the name of the class? Well, exactly the same rule apply for arrays. After new, you are going to put the data type of the array. Important, for the classes, the data type, the first letter is uppercase because it's the name of a class. Here, if my array is integers, int, lowercase, the new is going to have after the word int, lowercase. These two guys are the data type. And finally, here, you use again the brackets, but now after new, you put there how many elements do you want in your array? How many boxes you are going to have with the name X? In this case, I put 6. So in my example is this one, 6 boxes, 6 spaces. All of them receive the name X. It's not only the first one, it's all of them. X is this long space with the possibility to store 6 integers. Yes, you need a space between new and int. Otherwise, it's going to be like one word and you're going to have an error from the compiler. So yes, new, one word, space or something, and then int. New is the keyword, the same that we use for objects, and int is the data type int. So those 2 words. Good. So this is the grammatical rule that I need to ask you to memorize, to remember every single time that you want an array. Data type, the name, the brackets, empty, use the brackets, and then the equal, the new, the data type again, and the brackets inside with the number of elements that you want your array to have. in this case 6. Now, with the variables, the trivial variables, the only thing that you do is x equal 5, for instance. And with that, what happened is that you put this 5 inside of the box. Remember, we review variables and what happened when you use the variables. And this is very simple. Now, something that I cannot do in this case is the same. Because if I do something like this, the computer have a problem. Here, I ask for an x type int, but I ask for 6 boxes. If I just do x equal 5 in this second example, I am going to get an error. Why? Because the computer do not know in which of those boxes I want to put the 5. What I need to do every single time that I use an array is the following. Every single time that you use an array, after the name of the variable, the name of the array, we use again the brackets. And inside of the brackets, we put the position, the number of the box in which we want to put the value. In this case, hey, I want to put this 5 inside of the variable x, but because it's an array, inside of the box number 1. So you need the name of the variable, the array, but also you need the position in the array in which you want to put something. Hopefully makes sense. Now, tricky thing here, very important thing here for you to remember. Always, 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 when you work with arrays in programming, it's a common error to think that the box number 1 is the first one. I mean, could make sense. Is the first box, this one, it should be the number 1. However, exactly, in programming, and this is something that you're going to review in a different class in the future, but in programming, the first element, or when you talk about the first one, that first one have the index 0. So this box here is the box 0, the first one, and this one is the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So a very tricky situation in programming. If you ask for 6 elements, you have 6 elements, but they are the element 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You do not have an element 6, even though you ask for 6, because the numbers of the index start with the 0. Be careful with that. Very common error in programming. Forget that the element 1, the first one, is really the one with the index 0. So, for instance, in this instruction here, I am asking the computer to put the number 5 in the second box. I am asking the computer to put the number 5 here. I am asking the computer to make the number 5 the second element in the array, not the first one. What should I do if I want to put a 5 as a first element in the array X? First one, and let's put something like the array the number that we're going to call the index. And that index is the position for the value. So 10. Makes sense. I am going to show you step by step what is happening here, some slides, but this is the big picture. When we use arrays, the answer, the simple answer, you use arrays when you need several spaces to store data and really you do not want to provide a name for each of those boxes. Think about this like vectors or maybe matrix in your math classes. You need to store a big amount of data. You do not want to give a name to each of the numbers, each of the data. You want to put them together in a group. Arrays is your tool in programming. Good news, you can do arrays of everything. We can have arrays of integers, arrays of double, arrays of float, arrays of Boolean. Later, we're going to review that we can have arrays of objects. We can have arrays of students, arrays of professors, arrays of drones, arrays of apartments. That is how the computer handles this idea of several elements of the same type. We're going to play with that. So, important things. Arrays. One, they are collections. They are sets, groups, several variables together. It's a group. Two, when we think about an array, something very, very important that you need to remember is they are a group of elements, all of them consecutive. Starting with the 0 and moving to as many elements as you want minus 1. What? Yes, we ask for 6 elements. That is the total number of elements. And what you get is this array 0 to 5, 0 to n, 6, minus 1. Why? Because we add the 0 at the first element. Therefore, we have only 5 positions with numbers higher than 0. So, consecutive, a group. And the most important thing for the arrays, if you notice, we use only one type, in this case, integer. All the elements in the array are the same type. I can ask for 6 integers. I can ask for 100 integers, or floats, or doubles. You can choose the type that you want, but all the elements that you create are going to be from that data type. I need integers and doubles. You can create an array for the integers and an array for the doubles. 2 different arrays, 2 different data types. Okay, very good point in the chat. And yeah, do you remember that I mentioned before null pointer exception error? And I told you previous week, every single time that you get a null pointer exception error, the reason is because previous week question in your exam, null pointer exception error is because you didn't make the equal new for an object. Remember, the object is null. That is correct. So the new error that you are going to have in your programs, everyone, it happened to everyone, is this Different programming languages are going to present you different names, starting with the full word, but something that I want you to remember, doesn't matter the programming language, is out of bound exception. This out of bound is telling you, for instance, in my example, that I create an array. My array is X. I ask for 6 elements. Good. I have 6 boxes. The boxes have the numbers 0 to 5. But suddenly, in my program, you know what? I would like to use the position 100, and I want to put in the position 100 a number 7. You create your array with 6 elements, 6 boxes, and you want to use the box 100. That is an error. You're trying to use something that you do not create. You are out of bounds. Classical error when you do programming. So, unfortunately, the computer create the array. The computer is going to understand this. It's like, okay, array, position, value. When you run this, because this is out of the limits, you're going to get that error. We're going to work with these for loops plus arrays. And yes, it's going to happen a lot when you do iterations, just because in some point, and this is something coming, I need to show you examples, but you can think about, well, if I would like to print all the elements of the array, what I need to do, for instance, is I would like to print X in the position 0, and I would like to print X in the position 1, and I would like to print X in the position 2, and I would like to print X in the position 3. Looks like here I have a great opportunity for using a loop, right? X in a position, whatever, I put a variable here. And you can remember that that variable could be something that you have starting with 0 in a for loop, right? What happened if the condition here do not stop in the 5? What happened in the condition here stop even with X in the position 6? Could you agree with me that even trying to do something as simple as X in the position 6 is going to be an error? It's going to be this out of bound exception error. And it's like, why? I have 6 elements. Yes, but your 6 elements are the 0, 1, 2, and so on. And the last one is the element 5, not the element 6. So this is an error in the same way that this one is an error. And it doesn't matter if you put here the 100 or the 6, or you have here a variable, and for any reason, like a condition that is not well done, correctly established, this goes out of bounds. So every single time that you run your program, you get this out of bound, review the index, this number here for your arrays. Okay, this is the big picture. Important things to remember: the error. Important thing to remember: the data type, the numbers 0 to n-1, and arrays are a group of data, consecutive. Big picture. Now, step by step, let me review the details of every single thing that we're talking here about. Going back. Let's see. Number 1, I tell you the big picture, so you know what we are going to be doing. I am going to review the details, the small letters. Number 1, every single time that you want to create an array, you have an equal, always, something here, and something here. I am going to talk first about what you have here, the first part, right? If you remember, in the example that I just showed you, what I told you is, well, the first part is something like the type, the name, the square brackets. The second part is the new, the type again, the square bracket, and the number of elements. In my previous example, I used the 6, and as usual, any instruction in programming, you end with the semicolon. Details. You know what? In programming, grammatical rule, you have two options. You can put these guys, the square brackets, the ones that are empty, you can put the square brackets after the name of the variable, just like I did in my example. But also, if you prefer, you can put the square brackets between the name of the variable and the type. So I am telling you, in my example, I could have done int square brackets x, or I can do int x square brackets. Both are the same. The same. Which one is better? The one that you like the most. You are going to find usually several people like this one, just because int array, that is the meaning of the bracket, array. So some people put together int and the bracket, meaning an array of integers, and then the name. But this option is correct also. Always is necessary, always. I mean, I am talking about only this part here, but this is always needed. I haven't touched that part yet. I am going to talk more about that part, but right now, this thing is only about the first part. In the first part, you can put int square bracket name, or int, well, type name and square bracket, or type square bracket and name. Only first part. Exactly, I am going to mention the array list in the next slide. Correct. Good? So number one, I need you to be aware that you can find in the textbook or on the internet or in different sources, something like this or something like this, they are the same. You can put the square brackets after the type or after the variable. They work. Again, talking about what you put before the equal. Good? It's like, good. The only thing that you need to remember is data type go first, and then in some order, the brackets and whatever name you want for your variable. As I mentioned before, arrays. You can use any of the data types that you know. You are going to notice that I use a lot int, just because it's easy, 3 letters. We have been done a lot of examples with integers. We're going to be working with integers. It's easy to work with integers. But this is an example with floating point numbers. And you can change float for double or any other of the data types that you know. Good. Data type, and then square bracket or variable, and then variable or square bracket. Now, another important thing is, in my example, I show you int x square bracket equal new int, and I want 6 elements. You know that that line is really 2 statements, 2 instructions. Something that I want you to know, remember, is you can do this one line. That is correct, but also, and is equivalent, that line is exactly the same that int x, the brackets. Can you finish there with a semicolon? Yeah, remember when you do int x equal 5, but that one is the same that int x, the semicolon, and then in a different line you did x equal 5. Do you remember one line or two lines, but they are the same idea, just if you want to put everything together or not? In the second one, the same. I can put this in one line, just like I did this in one line. And in a different line, I can do that one. Now, exactly. Here, I have a variable that is not initialized. It's going to take the default value 0. In the case of the objects, it's going to be null, and then we give a value. Good. So for the arrays, the only thing that I need you to remember is, if by any chance you do not like the idea of using one line for any reason, and you use two lines, well, the first line I think is going to be easy to remember because it's exactly the first one, but replace the equal with the semicolon and you are done. However, when you want to do this, when you want to complete the second part, remember, here, the only thing that you put is the name of the array, the name of the variable. You do not use again the square brackets. You use the square brackets like in my example before, when you want to do something like, oh, in the first position, I want to put the number 7. When you use the square brackets in the left part of the equal, what you are doing, what you want to do is to put something in one of the boxes. You want to put, in this case, an integer number in one of the boxes because the boxes are there to store integer numbers. So, but if you are going to put this equal, new, etc., that is this, because you decide to split this line in two, just be careful that here you put only the name of the array. Why? Because you do not want to put the new, int, etc. in one of the boxes. That one is the initialization of the full array. That one is the initialization of X as an array, of X as a collection, not a particular value like here for one of the boxes in that collection. Can you create multiple arrays? Yes, you can. I am going to show you, but yes, you can do that. Now, my recommendation, usually when you do that, you can put the square brackets after the data type, like int square brackets, and then you can play with some letters. But I am going to show you. Okay, here, very important. This one is use the letter. This one is the letter with the square brackets. Letter with the square bracket, name and square bracket, you are playing with the values. Only the name, you are doing the initialization of the array. If you split this line in two, remember, these are the two lines. Good? Great. So, this is the first part. Now, the two lines, going back to integers, scores. Hopefully, if I show you these two lines, it's clear that you can translate this one to one line. Question in your exam, can you put these two lines, the creation of the array and the initialization of the array, in one line? One line. What do I need to do to put this in one line? It's like, delete this and just move this here and delete the semicolon. Hopefully that part is clear. Is int the bracket scores equal new int 10. Yes, thank you. So, okay, that one is going to create an array. How many elements in the array? Okay, 10 elements. This is the number of elements. The first one is going to be 0, and the last one, the 9. That is the only tricky part. Question in your exam, in the array scores, please put the score 100 in the first element of the array. In the first element, which is the number that you need to put inside of the quotation. Fully agree with you guys. Good. Hopefully everyone is following me. It's a very common question during the exam in the classroom. Professor, do you want me to put that 100 in the element 0 or in the first one? The first one is the 0. Remember, your exam is going to be online. I'm not there to answer your question, so I want to put this answer for you here. If you are asked to do something with the first element of an array, that first element is the element 0. I know, we need to change the paradigm here. It's not the 1, it's the 0. Please remember that. Good. And if you are asked to put 50 or any other thing in the second element of the array, just following the same idea, the second element is the number, that one is easy. The second element is going to be the 2. Yes or no? Okay, thank you guys. The second element is not the 2, but it's the second. Programming, arrays, second element. Why the 1? Because it's the number that follows the 0. And if the 0 is the first one, the 1 is the second one, and so on. Arrays, programming. Good, easy. Now, moving forward. Notation. The meaning of this basically is scores is the name of the variable. I mentioned this before, but I want to make clear each of the parts. Whatever you put here is the name of the variable. As you notice, the name of the variable, even though it's an array, we still follow the same rules that we described in the first week. Name for the variables, they are lowercase. We do not use uppercase for the variables. We do not use uppercase for the arrays. That is usually what we do. Now, we can use uppercase, but all the letters in uppercase if what we create is a constant. In this case, an array of constants, an array of numbers that never are going to change. So, same rules that you follow for the variables apply to arrays. Uppercase, lowercase, as you already know. When you read this, and now you are aware that you can use that directly here, that one is the data type, int. When you add the brackets, the only thing that you need to remember, bracket equal to array. So int and bracket, you are talking about the data type for an array of integers. Similar, if you follow double, short, long, etc. Same data types that you know. When we put this, you read that as an array of and the data type. So an array of integers, an array of short, an array of long, an array of whatever. When you read in a document in your exam, please create an array of the data type. Basically, that is telling you what to do to start the line that is going to create the array in the computer. Good? Now, very, very important. When you think about the array in the memory of your computer, something that I need you to remember is if you have this RAM memory, when you create an array, all these elements are consecutive. That basically means that if you think about which is the address in the memory of your computer for this box here, and I am going to use hexadecimal numbers. If you think like this one is like one box and the box have this particular address, the others are consecutive. Yeah, the RAM memory in your computer have bytes. Each byte have an address. So if I tell you that this box here is an integer number, and I told you that the address is the address of the first byte, is something like 0x12. Help me, what is the address for the next one? The one that is used? Tricky question. If the first one is this one, right? We can think like, well, the next one, plus one. Just one small detail. The number is the address for the first byte here. Do you remember how many bytes do you have for an integer number? Your RAM memory, the memory of your computer, work with bytes, right? Now, if I store an integer, that integer is inside of one of those bytes or maybe more. Okay, now you remember, data types, integer, 4 bytes. Okay, something that I need you to remember, and this is going to be important in future courses, is even though we draw these arrays as this kind of nice boxes, you need to remember that this 79 is stored something like that. That 79 is using 4 bytes because that 79 is the first element of an array of integers, and each integer uses 4 bytes according with what we reviewed before. So now that we know that, this one is the first byte, the 12, but then we continue and the 13 is really part of the same. 14, 15. What is the address for the next one? 12 plus 4, right? Yep, I agree. And in that way, you can continue. Now, remember something. When you ask the computer, scores in the position 0 is going to be 79, or scores in the position 1 is going to be 87, or scores in the position 2 is going to be 94. The computer is going to use this 0, 1, 2 as you are using that. the computer is going to use this 1 as the first element, the 2 as the second element, and it's going to use everything consecutive. Here, you do not need to think about these bits and bytes. The computer understands that if you're asking for the 0, you're asking for the first element, and if you want to put there the 79, the computer is going to use these 4 bytes because the 4 bytes correspond to 1 integer. You do not need to worry about the addresses. That is the good news in programming. You are thinking kind of high-level language, remember? High-level language, you are thinking about 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. 9 elements because my array is 9 is the last number because my array is the 10 elements. But in future classes, when you start working with the hardware, when you need to do things in the low level, remember, these 0 and 1 are really 4, 4, 4, 4. Anyway, they are consecutive. The first element is going to be always the one that is in the address 0x12, yes. But when you access that element, you never mention the 12. You never use the real address of the element. You use 0, but the real address in this example is 12. I put 12 randomly. I mean, any variable that you create in a program, any variable have an address, any variable. So if I do int x equal 5, what you are doing is to create a variable, and that variable is integer, and that variable is x, but that variable is in somewhere in the RAM. Somewhere in the RAM, in some position in the RAM, and therefore have some address in the RAM. So if I am doing an example, I can tell you, oh, this one is going to be in the position 55. I put randomly a 55. I do not know where the variable is, really, because I am not reviewing the inside of the computer. Just to give you an example. In this case, I put 12 because my goal was to tell you that the second one is not 13, but the second one is 16. Or if I use this 55 for the first one, my goal is to tell you that the next one, if I make this an array, the next one is 59, not 56. That's it. But it was a random number, the 12 or the 55. Good? Anyway, memory and things. The only thing, they are consecutive. They are together. Sometimes it could happen that you want to create an array. For instance, I want to create an array of 100 elements. And you're going to get an error. And that error is going to tell you that you do not have enough space, even though you have space in the memory. Something that is a problem with arrays is the following. Think about the classroom. Usually people in the classroom do not sit consecutive, right? Imagine that I have a classroom and my classroom have a space for 9 people. So technically, I can put in my classroom an array of 9 elements, right? Thinking about consecutive, something like this. Now, if one person arrives to my classroom and that person sits here, one variable, well, I still have space to store an array of 8 elements, right? 8 consecutive elements. I lost one, I can put an array of 8. I have a problem. If one student arrives to the classroom and sit here, well, could I create an array of 7? I am going to have a space for an array of 7. And the point is, no, because arrays are consecutive in the memory. You can create an array of 3 because those 3 spaces are consecutive. Again, thinking about complete one row, continuing in the next one. You can create an array of 4 there. You have in total 7 spaces. But if you want to create arrays, you cannot create an array of 7 spaces because you cannot have those 7 consecutive. However, you can create an array of 3 and you can create an array of 4 because this element here is avoiding you to create an array of 7. Very important quality of the arrays. They should be consecutive in the memory. Why? Because remember, I am using the name and I am giving here a number. So if the computer allowed me to create an array of 7 and this guy is in the middle of my array, the risky part is that in some case, the computer can get confused and think that X in 3 is this one. And as I mentioned before, that one could be something, a variable that is not really part of the array. In my example is the student that arrived at sit there, and basically I do not have anymore these consecutive spaces. So good news with the arrays, they are easy to create, they are easy to handle with these numbers. Bad news, the memory management. But you're going to work more about that when you review data structures. Arrays are very good, but tricky part, handling memory, using the memory. They have this strong requirement of being consecutive in the memory. Good? Now, usually for our purposes, the only thing that you need to remember is the name of the array is the name for all the elements. The name of the array is not one of these guys. Usually in some books, in some web pages or whatever, you're going to have a representation of the arrays like this, like an horizontal line. However, you can also do this. The draw do not really represent something in your computer. Remember, the RAM in your computer is not like a whiteboard. The RAM memory in your computer is not two-dimensional. Your RAM memory is just a small circuit. So whatever representation you check in the textbook or on the internet, like a row or a column, those are arrays. Something very, very important that is going to happen always, the name is outside, the name is outside. The name is the name for the column, and these guys are the elements, and we can work with them. Now, working with them. We review how to create them. What do you need in the left part and what do you need in the right part? Once you have your array, using the array, you can use the array in any place in which you usually use variables. The only difference is going to be now these things. What are you talking about? Yeah, if you have a program and in your program you create a variable, now you have a program and you're creating an array, doesn't matter which is the format that you use. Before, you can store a number in your variable. You can use the equal with the variable. Well, you can continue doing that with your array. The only tricky part is now you need to use not only the name, but also the index, and you can store something in your array. Now, also, you can do system out, println, and you can print a variable. You can use exactly the same for your arrays. but you cannot print all the array with one print instruction. Do not do that. And what happens if I just put that? Similar to what happened when you do this with the objects. Because remember, you're using this new. You cannot print A, the full A, all the elements in A. But you can print A in a particular position. What happens if I want to print all the elements? You need to repeat this line several times. What do you do to repeat one line several times? Like, what do you do to print the 5 elements in my array A? I already told you, you cannot use system out println A. That is not going to work. You need to use A, and you need to use the brackets. Right now, I am printing the element 0. I am sure that at this point, you are going to notice this connection, very strong connection between arrays and loops. Because one of the first things that you're going to do with arrays is, well, if you want to print, for instance, all the elements in the array, well, I am pretty sure that you're considering a for loop here, that you are considering the variable that is going to control the loop. For some reason, makes sense to start with the 0. A condition. I have 5 elements, so it could make sense to use the 5 in the condition. The increment. Hopefully you remember this plus plus, incrementing 1. And that loop is going to run 5 times. And in particular, the variable x is going to start with the value 0 and is going to end with the value 4, right? Because 4 is the last number lower than 5. I can use x here. So instead of giving inside of the bracket a particular value, 0, 1, 2, I use a variable. A variable as an index of the array, yes. And that variable is going to have the value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that print is going to be executed for printing A0, A1, A2, A3, A4. You're going to have on the screen all the elements in the array. Loops, arrays, printing everything. So as you notice, I am using this as usual. Now, what if I have something like, you know what? A in the position 0 is going to be equal to A in the position 1 times 2 plus A in the position 3. If I give you a line like that, can you explain me what is happening there? Can we agree that each of these is one particular box? A number? A particular expression, mathematical thing that we need to do there using some values. But now, instead of having something like A equal to B plus times 2 plus C, instead of having these 1, 2, 3 different variables, maybe integers, now I can use only one name, the name of the array, but different boxes, different numbers. I can add the 1 and the 3, and the result be stored in the 0. I can do the opposite, add the 0 and the 1 and store in the 3, depending on the problem that I am solving. looks easy, right? You just, okay, the brackets, remember the index, but variables at the end. Now, examples. Do we understand what is happening there? Scores is an array. We want to store the number 89 in the second, no, in the third position, or in the position with the index 2, whatever you want to use. So scores is an array. I know that because these brackets. And basically what I am asking is for the 89 to be here, just because, well, 0, 1, and this is the 2, the box number 2. Okay. Scores. What is this first? What does it need to be? Two things. Number one, my expectation at this point is, you know, that first need to be a variable. It needs to be a variable because the only thing that you can put inside of is an integer value. That integer value is going to be the number. I mean, I put there a number 2 or a 100 or some number, whatever number. Or I put there a variable. The variable could be X that I use in my previous example, or any other that you want. I am using first. It should be a variable. But moreover, it needs to be an integer variable. And that integer variable needs to have a value. What is the value? I do not know. It's probably a variable that I have above in my program. Maybe that one. So if I have that, I am talking about the array scores. I am talking about a variable that is going to have the value 1. You do not need to put 1. I mean, just because it's first. You can put 10. The name of the variable is first, whatever. The value is the one that is going to be used as an index. The same array, the same index. If it's 10 here, it's going to be 10 here. Did you notice what is happening with that line? Can we agree that the only thing that is happening is I am adding 2 to the value of one of the elements in the array, and basically the result is going to be stored in the same value? So if I have maybe a 10 there, after doing this line, I am going to lose the 10, and I am going to have here a 12, just because I add 2 to the elements in the position first, and I store the result in the same position first. I can increase or decrease values in the array. What do you think about this one? In particular, remember this idea that I have about storing all your grades from the labs in one array. And that array could be this array with 20 elements. Well, I have this idea about, I can do the average of all those grades. And the only thing that I need to do to calculate that average is add all the numbers. In this case, I am adding 0 and 1, but if my array is 10 elements, scores in 0 plus scores in 1 plus scores in 2 plus scores in 3, and so on. And at the end, a division, the number of elements. In this case, 2. If you have 20 labs, division by 20, and I could have these statistics about your labs, working with arrays in this case. Finally, as I showed you before, you can print elements, one element in the array. Moreover, remember the result of string plus integer? String plus integer, a string. This is an integer, yes. Scores in 5 is one of these boxes, one of them. And that one is an integer value. When you add that integer value with a string, your result is a string, the string that you print on the screen. So you can do things like this in the same way that you played before with variables, in the same way that in previous examples, you could have done something like top plus a simple variable x. But now is to one of the boxes in the array. Variables, arrays, similar use. As I mentioned before, you can use any of the types. The only thing, please remember, if you use char, new char. If you use double, new double. You use boolean, new boolean. What about the number here? How many elements can you create in an array? Which one could be the minimum number that you can put there inside of the brackets? And what could be the maximum? Is any limit? Minimum number. If you are doing this new, any type, the brackets, which is the minimum number that you think could be required there? The only limit, it should be a positive number. Well, a positive number or the 0. If you put 0, you're asking for an empty array. Basically, you're asking for a null array. You're asking for an array without elements. Depending on what you are doing, but 99% of the time, what you are going to do is to ask at least for one element, an array with one element. An array with one element, that is the same as a variable. In the practical use, yes, an array with one element is a space for one number. So that is the same as a variable. However, you need to follow the grammatical rules to work with variables or to work with an array. So the space that you're going to have in an array of 1 is the same space that you have in a variable alone, but it is possible to create an array of 1. It is possible. You can do it. No particular reason for doing that. Usually you are going to use arrays for more than one element. The maximum, the only thing is the number there should be an integer number. Do you remember which is the biggest number, integer value that you can use in Java? It's a long type, right? Do you remember which one is the highest number that you can have in a long variable? Eight bytes. It's a very big number. However, the problem is not the number. You can add for terabytes. The problem here, the memory of your computer. Moreover, the problem here, a program in Java, remember, is under the control of the Java virtual machine. the Java virtual machine is not allowed to use all the memory in your computer. The Java virtual machine, when the Java virtual machine is going to run, the operating system in your computer is going to give to the virtual machine a space in the memory, a space. That means never, never, never the Java virtual machine take control of the full space in the memory. Why? Java take care of the security of your computer. For Java, the criteria is there is no reason for one single program to use all the memory available. So the Java virtual machine is going to limit your programs to do not do that. Can I change that? Yes, you can configure your virtual machine and you can ask your virtual machine to use more or less memory, but by default, the configuration of the Java virtual machine is to use a space in the memory, not 100% of the memory. You can review the documentation of the Java virtual machine and check about the parameters to configure the memory use. But by default, the Java virtual machine that you are running, the one that you install, the one that is executed by your developer environment, never, never, never is going to be able to use the full memory in your computer. So if you want to create an array here of 1 terabyte, just because you have 1 terabyte of RAM memory, it's not going to work. It's going to be an error. One line or 2 lines, 1 line, different data types, the same. My goal at this point, you should be able to read this and understand what is happening in those lines. Good. As usual, if you create an array, initial values for all the elements, 0 for integers, 0.0 for floating point numbers, characters are empty, false for the Boolean, null for everything else. Use the same that we have with variables. Good? Any questions so far? Good. So guys, this information is in your textbook. If you want to review more examples, if you want to go ahead and check the topic, what we cover is for the second edition of the textbook, chapter 6, and today I basically cover 7 pages. Good? If there is no more question, empty space, like what? Can you give me an example? If you create an array of characters, yes, you can store an empty space. Empty spaces for the names and the symbols, yes. What else? Yes, of course. Remember this, if I create an array like this, and this one is equal to new int 5, automatically, what do I have? I have an array X, I have 5 elements, 0 to 4. Which values do I have inside? According with what I told you before, the default values for integers. So I'm going to have 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So at this point, if I do something like printing X in the position 2, I am going to have on the screen the number 0. So if you create an array of 5, like I am doing here, you have 5 elements. Can you use 3? You can put values 1 in the position 0, you can put a value 2 in the next position, you can put another value in the third position. So basically what you could be doing is I have a 1 here, a 2 here, a 3 here, but you are still using 5 positions because you have these 2 zeros in the position 4 and the position 5. So if you create your array of 5, you are using 5. If you do not change the values of some of those spaces, you have a 0, the default value. Makes sense. And obviously you can print the values 0 to 4, and you're going to get these zeros printed on the screen if you didn't touch it. Yeah, you can use X1, X3, X2. You ask for 5 spaces, but you can be using only one. It's not exactly what we want to do, but the computer is going to allow you to do that. Yes. Okay, guys. So good. So we continue tomorrow. Thank you.